Lamed Beis Summit Beis. Today's daf is Lamed Gimel 33, and we are Lamed Beis Summit Beis.
Baruch Hashem, by the way, I had my hands full with coffee.
No problem.
Thank you. Good morning.
I'm glad you're doing well. So we're in daf Lamed Beis Summit Beis, and the Mishnah had said if somebody put their eruv on a tree above 10 tefachim, it's not going to be a good eruv. Below 10 tefachim, it's going to be a good eruv. And we're dealing with what kind of space is this? Because as we understand, the eruv has to be accessible in the same domain as you are and accessible to you. So as far as it being in a tree, we had explained that this follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was lenient and said that anything that is not a Torah prohibition of Shabbos, it's a rabbinic prohibition of Shabbos, which we call shvus, a Shabbos fence that the Chachamim made, that only applied to Shabbos when it is clearly Shabbos, meaning the onset of Shabbos has come not only because the sun has dropped beyond the horizon and we're in the twilight zone, it's twilight, and so it could be Shabbos at any moment, but it actually is Vadei Shabbos. But in the Bein Hashmashos, which is a time where the transition is happening, we saw this in the Gemara and Brachas, and the transition from Friday into Shabbos is happening at some point. Maybe it happens at a specific point that we just don't know, or it happens over a gradual space. We talked about that in Brachos. That at that point, a rabbinic prohibition, a shvus, would not apply. And therefore, even though on Shabbos you're not supposed to actually be standing in a tree or take something off directly that's on the tree, but at the onset of Shabbos, when the eruv has to take effect, at that point you're allowed to take it off because it's still Bein Hashmashos. It's still not yet fully nighttime and the next day, but it's in this transition point. And as Rebbe says, there is no Isser Shvus, no rabbinic prohibition at that point. So that's how you access it. Now, the Gemara is now going to deal with where is this tree, and where on the tree is the person going to be, and where's the bread, in order to define that the eruv is within the same space halachically. So the Gemara said, Amar Rava. Rava said, this is about 8-10 lines from the bottom of Lamed Beis on base 32b. Amar Rava, so Rava said, Lo shanu ela be'ilan ha'imid chutz libur shalir. This eruv, this bread or this meal that this person had set, is in 2,000 amas outside of his city, but it is. It also has to be outside of the boundaries of another city as well. Meaning, if he had, let's say, he wants to travel from city A to city C, and in between there's a city B, and he put the eruv in that city. So then, since he's in another city, the eruv, the tree, is actually going to be completely filled, and wherever he puts the eruv on that tree, it's going to count as within the same domain that he's going to be. And ibura shel ir is a term, literally would be the same word as the pregnancy or the extra month of a year. It means the extra space of the city. And as we're going to learn, and mentioned briefly before, that when we measure a city, we square it. So it goes by the farthest house north of the city and the farthest house south of the city and west of the city and east of the city. You make a square, and that square is the city boundaries in regards to Techumin, in regards to its travel outside of the city. And if this tree is within that ibur, within that, let's call it squaring of that city, the space of that city, it's considered as if it's all filled. And as if it's completely filled, everything is going to be in the domain of Rishus HaYachid. Now, even though it's not a Rishus HaYachid, a private domain in regards to carry, because that's a different designation. In regards to Tehum, in regards to travel outside of the city, where we give the city this set boundary, the everything is considered filled as if it was a walled-in city, as if it was completely enclosed in regards to the distance travel, and therefore the Eruv sitting in a tree is also going to be considered within the same domain as he is. If the tree is within the domain or the boundaries of a city, even above is going to be an Eruv. The masa kamana mal yadami, because the city, as if it is filled, and therefore, since the city is as if it's filled, so he is as if he's above 10 tefachim also. He's in a private domain, even if he's down on the street, because it's as if it's all above 10 tefachim. It's as if it's all above the public domain, and it's in a private domain, and therefore he can take it. Now, even though technically once he starts taking it, he's carrying, and he's not allowed to carry in that space. It's not permissible to carry, so technically he can't take the Eruv in any case, because he's in regards to carrying, he's in a public domain. But since in regards to Eruv of distance, of travel, the Eruv Techumen, he's as if he's above the public domain and the private domain. So the Eruv is in the same domain, and it's going to work for him. Now this is a unique dichotomy here. We have a space that in regards to carrying, which is what he's going to need if he's going to take the bread, it's going to be a public domain, and he can't carry it. But in regards to Techumen, in regards to the boundaries of the city of where he's going to travel from, so now he's in city A, he travels to city B, which is within the 2,000 amma, and that's where he puts his Eruv in a tree within the boundaries of that city. It's as if he's in that tree. It's as if he's up above the same level as the bread, and even though he can't technically take it, but he's within the same domain, and it's going to work as an Eruv.
So when you say you can't technically take it, I mean, you can't climb a tree. Doesn't matter where the tree is. You can't climb a tree on Shabbos.
And
so the Eruv, if it's above 10 Tvachim, is inaccessible to him. I hear what you're saying that.
Oh no, he can reach. He's taller than 10 Tvachim. He can reach there without climbing the tree.
So why the 10 Tvachim law in the first place? Why not say it?
That's a new domain, as we'll see in a few moments. Above 10 Tvachim, if the tree is 10 Tvachim high, or 4 Tvachim wide, and it's above 10 Tvachim, so it's in a Rishus HaYachid, it's in a private domain. But since this tree is within the boundaries of a city, wherever he's standing is also considered private domain, not in regards to carrying, but in regards to Techumen, in regards to distance measures of a city. And so this counts as if it's a private domain because it's within the boundary of the city, and therefore he's allowed to, it's as if in regards to distance travel in Techumen, it's as if he's in a public domain, a private domain.
I get that, but that would also apply if the Eruv was put on the table. But the Eruv is put in a tree. The tree is problematic. Vis-a-vis the Eruv, the tree is very problematic in terms of accessibility.
No, so that we already saw yesterday.
Why did they choose the example of a tree? I mean, that's why they chose a tree, right?
Well, the part that you can't use a tree on Shabbos, we already saw yesterday that at the onset of Shabbos, when the Eruv takes effect, you are allowed to take it off the tree because it's a shavus, it's a rabbinic prohibition of using a tree because you may come to break off a branch. So it's a fence, it's a gzeira derabanan, it's a shavus, and therefore at the onset of Shabbos, at Bein HaShmashis, you're actually still allowed to take it off. So at the onset of the Eruv, you are allowed to take it off. Now, our only question is, are you in the same domain? So in regards to carrying, you're not in the same domain, but that's irrelevant to us. What we need is in regards to travel, you're in the same domain. In regards to Techumen, you're in the same domain. And so therefore, he says, if the tree is within the space of the city, of this other city, the in-between city, so then it's going to count as valid even if it's above 10 tefach. However, if it's outside of the Ibur Shalir, it's outside of the domain of the city, the space of the city. So now, if he's on the road and he's intending to have Shvisa, he's intending to have a Shabbos on the road, and which is a public domain, and the Eruv is up in a private domain, So even though he can access it, he can reach and get it, because at the onset of Shabbos, he's still allowed to take it. But the problem is that he's in a different domain, and it's not going to work. So the Gemara says, well, even if the tree is outside of the city, it'll have to be more than just outside of the city. Ihachi, if that's the case, chutz libur shalir nami, even if it's outside of the city, kiven the Amar Rava, since Rava said hanoisen eruva yishla arba ames, that any time you put an eruv down and you made your tchum, you made your shvisa for Shabbos, your space for Shabbos, and your domain for Shabbos in regards to travel is at where you put your meal, that meal gives you a 4 amma space. It gives you a 4 amma private space, and 4 ammas is a reshus hayachid. 4 ammas is going to be a private domain. So that's your personal private domain. So and private domain is above 10 tefachim as well. So the tree and him would be in the same space. So you're right. What we're dealing with is that the branches of the tree are more than 6 feet long, and the bread is out on a tree that is longer than 6 amos. Sorry, longer than 4 amos, about 6 feet. And so you put your bread out on that tree. If you put it below 10 tefachim, great, so you're in the same domain. But if you put it above 10 tefachim and it branches out beyond the makom shvisa, beyond your space, so it's outside of a city and outside of your space, and therefore it's going to be inaccessible. When it's chav and lishos beikras, his intent is to be at the trunk of the tree, and the bread is out at the end of a branch that's more than 6 feet away, more than 4 amas, and therefore it's going to count as in a different domain. We do. This is a good. John asked a question: is there a height? How high up it can be? Now, with regards to the height limit of sukkah, that's only when you need a notice, when you need to see what's there. So the crossbeam of an alleyway, a maximum height is 20 amas because you have to notice it. Sukkah, the schach, the mitzvah is you have to know that you're in a sukkah. Sitting in a sukkah is a knowledge. You have to be aware of the schach. There, the height is a max. Here, it's not knowing where the bread is; it's being with the bread. So it can't be more than 10 tefachim above the ground, even though that you can see it and you can reach it. But the concept is you have to be in the same domain. But if you're in the same domain, so yeah, you could be at the top of the tree if you're both living in a tree house. The bread and the person in the treehouse. Now you're not going to be able to travel much because you can't get down on Shabbos unless you have a ladder that's not attached to the tree. But technically speaking, there is no limit because you too can be up that high. In any case, so he wants to be we're now in Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph at the top, 33a at the top. So his intent is to be at the root of the tree, and the branch is out above 10 tefachim and 6 amos, 6 feet, about 4 amos away from him. So it's in a separate domain. So Gemara says, well, then if that's the case, ma'ala mata. So why does it say that it goes above and below? Above and below has nothing to do with it. It's that it's far away. It's more than 4 amos away from him. That's the main issue here. So Gemara says, no, actually, it's not a problem that it's that far away because he can bring it less than 4 amos at a time and bring it into his space. So the reason actually is because the branch dips below 10 tefachim at some point, and that becomes a reshus harabim. Since it dips, the branch itself comes out of the tree above 10 tefachim, dips down into the public domain of 10 tefachim, and then goes back up, and that's where the eruv is. And uh, and the reason that's important is that now the airspace of that section of the branch that's within the Rishus Harabim will break from the two private domains, and you can't carry over there and can't bring the bread in. And as the Gemara is going to say, because the people in the Rishus Harabim use that section of the branch that's below 10 tefachim to adjust their packages over their shoulders. So it functions as an assistance tool to travelers on the public domain, and that makes it a part of the public domain. As we've seen, that any post in a public domain that's 9 tefachim high, which is usable for people's packages that are over their backs to readjust it, is a function of the public domain and counts as the public domain. What does it mean below? That it goes down and goes back up. But he can carry it above the 10 tefachim, above that section from one part of the tree to the other. And it says, no, that's a part of the branch that people use for the public domain. And so it's a section of the public domain itself because it is usable and functional as a part of the public domain. This picture that I have is not as helpful because the branch doesn't seem to dip as much as I would expect it would in this idea that it dips down in between. Let me see if this image is going to be clearer, but that's the concept. The concept is that the branch is on in a space that actually is more usable in between to the public domain. Maybe ArtScroll has some pictures for you that work, but this is the concept of it. As Ula said, a post that's 9 tefachim high in the public domain, and because it is usable for the public domain, because people lean on it or lean their packages on it as they readjust it on their back, that counts as a public domain. And therefore, if somebody throws something, if somebody throws something from a private domain into a public domain and it lands on that post, it will be as if it landed in the public domain space itself. So that's the explanation the Gemara gives for this tree scenario. What is this halacha of Rebbe and the Rabbanan, which we said that the tree is you can take something off the tree and not my Rebbe, my Rabbanan. The Tani we learned. As we learned, that if you put the Eruv in a tree above 10 tefachim, so it's not going to be a good Eruv. Below 10 tefachim, it's going to be a good Eruv. And as we explained, that the intent is that he's going to have his shvisa, his Shabbos domain is going to be at the trunk of the tree on the ground, and the branch itself is horizontally too far out for him to access it when he's at the trunk of the tree, and that's why it's in a different domain. So, but even though that it is above 10 tefachim, he may not take the Eruv from that space because it's even though that it's below 10 tefachim, it's not above 10 tefachim. Nevertheless, he's allowed to take it. He's not allowed to take it on Shabbos because he's using the tree. Nevertheless, the Eruv is going to be a good Eruv. Because at the onset of Shabbos, meaning Bein HaShmashos, when you have to stop doing malacha, you're not allowed to do work on Shabbos, and then therefore you have to. That defines your space for Shabbos, which is the moment of the onset of Shabbos. That using of the tree is going to be a rabbinic prohibition and is still permissible at that point. So at the onset of Shabbos, when your space is defined, at that point, you're still allowed to take the tree, even though that on Shabbos morning, when you want to eat, you're not allowed to take it. However, if it's within 3 tefachim of the ground, that means it's on such a low branch, or the branch is bending down, or it's on a slope, and so the tree itself on one side it's above 10 tefachim, but you put it on the branch that's closest to the slope, and so therefore it's going to be within 3 tefachim of that ground. So there you're allowed to take it, because this has nothing to do with the Eruv. It has to do with the prohibition that the Chachamim made of using a tree is only above 3 tefachim, because you don't usually break off a branch, and so that constitutes as a part of the ground. And with even a branch, is something that's on a branch less than 3 tefachim from the ground, that you're allowed to actually use on Shabbos. So you can take the Eruv off of a branch that's within 3 tefachim of the ground, but you can't take it off of anything above that, even though that it's below 10 tefachim. Nasna b'kilkala, if it's inside a basket. So he has a basket attached to the tree, but talai be'ilan, and he hung it on the tree. Afilu malam asar tefachim eruv eruv. Divrei Rabbi says even if it's above 10 tefachim, the eruv is going to count as an eruv, because we're going to see in a moment that we're going to consider the eruv in the basket as if it's in its own domain. And this is where the tree itself is going. The Gemara explained the tree itself is not 4 tefachim wide. Where up until now we talk about the tree itself is 4 tefachim wide, and that's what defines its private domain. Here we're talking about that the tree is a narrower tree. It's not 4 tefachim wide, and the basket itself is going to count as its space. So the Chachamim say, Kol makam sha'asa litla ein eruv eruv. Any space, the Chachamim say, any time that the eruv is not accessible on Shabbos, it's not going to count as a good eruv. So now the Gemara says, okay, so what are we talking about? On which part of this brisa of the Chachamim disagreeing and saying, look, you can't access it, it's not going to be a good eruv? Is it going on the second part of the brisa where Rebbe said that if you put it into a basket, that the eruv is going to be a good eruv in the basket? And the Rabbanan say no, since after all I cannot take it out of the basket on Shabbos anyhow, because the basket's hanging on the tree and I can't take it off of there. And the Chachamim are of the disagree with Rebbe, and they say even though that at the onset of Shabbos, when I'm setting my space for Shabbos, the onset of Shabbos is what defines my space, and as we said, Rebbe says at that point you're still allowed to take it off the tree because it's a rabbinic prohibition. The Chachamim disagree and say no, that even at Bein Hashmashos, even at twilight, you're not allowed to do a rabbinic prohibition either. Not only Torah prohibitions, but even rabbinic prohibitions are prohibited at that point, and so you can't access the bread which is on the tree. Well, here we have another issue. What we talked about when we talked about this concept that you're not allowed to use a tree, we had mentioned that that's when you're directly using the tree, when you hung your hammock on the branch. However, we said that it would be permissible if you hung the hammock on a hook that you attached to the tree, or you tied a rope to the tree and then you hung your hammock on that loop that you attach a tree, so that your hammock itself is not attached to the tree, but it's attached to something that's attached to the tree. You're allowed to use that hammock. So to hear this bread is not not on the tree, it's on something that is on the tree, and therefore it should be permissible. And if the Chachamim say that that's prohibited because you're not allowed to access the tree, even at that point of the onset of Shabbos, you're not allowed to access it because you're using the tree. Well, what you're saying is that the Chachamim don't have this concept of tzedadim, of the sides, meaning it's a secondary connection to the tree, not direct connection to the tree. Right? Ella Aresha. So rather, Rashi says, so what? Maybe that's what the Chachamim hold. But the idea is, that would make it a machlokas between an individual opinion and the Chachamim, the majority, and that would make it the halacha that you're not allowed to use it, and that's not the case. Ela Reisha. So must be the Chachamim are disagreeing with the beginning part, which is that you put not the last case, which is where you put it in a basket, but rather you put it on the tree itself, and they're going to disagree and say that even if it's below 10 tefachim and even if it's below 3 tefachim, you're not allowed to access. Well, below 3 tefachim maybe because everybody agrees you're allowed to access it, but if it's below 10 tefachim, even at the onset of Shabbos, you're not allowed to access it, and therefore it's not going to be good eruv. Ela Reisha, Hay Ilan Hechidami. What's the case of this tree? The lesbe arba, if the tree itself does not have four tefachim, makim pataru. So this is the concept of makim patar, which we've seen, that there are 4 domains in Shabbos. There is the biblical, the Torah level public domain, Rishus Harab. There's the Torah level private domain, Rishus HaYachid, which is an enclosed space. We have a Torah level makom pater, an exempt space. And that is a space that doesn't have the dimensions to be either public or private domain. And over here, there is a Carmelis, which is an in-between space, which is a rabbinic public domain. But makom pater doesn't have dimensions for that. And that is, and a classic one is it's 10 tefachim high, but less than 4 tefachim wide. So it's not enough to be a private domain, and it's not a public domain, and therefore it's a makom pater, it's an exempt space. So if this tree is less than 4 tefachim thick, wide, and it is 10 tefachim or below 10 tefachim, either way, it's going to be a makom pater, an exempt space, and so you're allowed to actually carry there. Right, and it's its own space, and it's part of the public domain. It's a part of the private domain, and so therefore it's going to be that his eruv is in the same space that he is, and it should be okay. Because either way, what difference does it make if it's above 10 tefachim, below 10 tefachim? It's going to be a valid space. Now, if you say v'ida isbe arba, and if you tell me no, actually we're talking about a tree that has a space of 4 tefachim, and that's why it's going to be prohibited when it's above 10 tefachim, because now it's 4 tefachim wide, 10 tefachim high. That makes it that's the definition of a private domain. A private domain is a self-contained space that's above 10 tefachim and 4 tefachim wide, and it's either that it has an enclosure of that size, that the fence around the space is 10 tefachim high, and the inside space is 4 tefachim wide, or it's a post itself, and then above that is going to be private domain. So if that's the case, kinasa b'kol kolam I have it. So if that's the case, that it's a private domain, who cares that it's also in a basket? It's going to be within a private domain. Amar Ravina, so Ravina says, yeah, we're going to have to make the change. And even though we said at the beginning of that the tree is talking about that it's 4 tefachim thick and 10 tefachim high, and therefore it's defined as a private domain, and you put it above 10 tefachim in the tree, you're going to be in a street, and your eruv is in a private domain, and it doesn't work because your eruv and you are in different spaces. The second part of the brisa about the basket is talking about in a tree that is less than 4 tefachim thick. And so it actually, the basket is going to help us define the space of this bread. But the basket is, in talking about the tree has less than 4 tefachim. The Kollel mashlimas bar, and it's the basket that completes the space into a 4 tefachim thick. So this image over here is the one that hopefully you have one as well if you're on the phone. This image shows you that it's sort of attached to the tree in a way that it widens the thickness of the tree. And now this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, which we'll see in a moment, that if it's the eruv is above 10 tefachim, it's not going to be an eruv even if he intends to be in the same space, unless the Eruv is in a significant space, and a significant space is going to be that it has to be the Eruv itself has to be on a 4 tefachim space, and if not for the basket without the basket, the tree is just not a significant space. It's not that it's in another domain; it's in a non-domain. It's in a non-space because it's not within it's not on a 4 tefachim space.
So how does that work exactly? I'm a little bit confused. So we saw back in Shabbos. So a private space would be four by 4, and 10 tefachim high would be
The requirement for a
requirement.
Yeah.
Right. So this tree, I mean, you can't get into the tree. You're not in the space of the tree, even if it's 4. I don't know, whatever the diameter has to be to make it 4 by 4. You're not in the tree. So how are you in the same space as the tree?
Just to clarify, I think what you're asking is when you have a platform, the platform is 10 tefachim high, 4 tefachim wide. You can stand on it, but you're not going to be in the domain, right? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Same in the tree. You're going to be standing on that space. You're not going to be in that space.
But you can't climb on the tree.
Well, I could before Shabbos, and then I'm in the tree for Shabbos.
So it's always the same terrace. Before Shabbos, I don't have to do it on Shabbos as long as I could have done it before Shabbos.
Well, I'm intending at the onset of Shabbos, I'm standing in the tree, and then I hop down right as Shabbos comes in. Right?
With your basket.
I'm in the same domain because I'm in the tree together with him. That's really what we're asking. Is my intent to be in the tree? Is my intent to be below the tree? But I could be in the tree. I can be on the same domain. It's like being on top of a platform, which the halacha is that is the airspace of a private domain. So I'm in the airspace of private domain, even though I'm not in a confined private domain.
So just to mix a whole bunch of cases, I gave some food to somebody. I said, take it to the big tree outside of wherever, and put it there for me. So he goes and he finds somebody, says, take it and put it in the tree. So good. So now it's in the tree. And right before Shabbos, Beta Shmashos, because this is a Shavuos, I have to climb up the tree and grab the basket.
And that would be okay.
Okay.
Right. V'Rebbe Savarla. Now,
but just one last question. If I just grabbed the basket and didn't climb on the tree, would that be okay?
I can take it out of the basket at this point, according to Rebbe, because I can take the bread out because it's a.
I don't have to enter that rishus. Is that what you're saying? Because
we have two possibilities. My intent is to define my Shabbos space in the tree, so I'm in the same domain as the bread, or I can define my space on the ground, and that's where my shvisa, kona shvisa, I'm defining my space on the ground in the public domain, and I'm sharing the space of the bread, not because I'm in the same domain, but because the bread is below 10 tefachim. Those are the two possibilities. I'm in the tree together with the bread above 10 tefachim, or the bread is below 10 tefachim, and I'm intending to be on the ground at the root of the tree, at the base of the tree, and the bread is below 10 tefachim, and so it's within the same domain, the same space as my intentioned Shabbos space.
But you climb up on the tree, Bena Shmashos, you're fine. But then you have to get out of it before Knesset Shabbos, right?
If I want to travel, unless there's
otherwise you're going to be stuck in the tree.
Correct. Rabbi Savilak Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi follows the opinion of Rabbi Meir, the Savilak Rabbi Yehuda, and it follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. What are these two opinions of Rabbi Meir? So the one we learned already in regards to, we had earlier in regards to mezuzah or regards to doorway in an opening of a courtyard, the concept of chokikin lahashlim, that we imagine that that you've cut out the stone in order to extend the space. That the scenario is that you have the bottom of your doorway is wide enough to count as a doorway. However, it arches and it becomes narrower towards the top where it arches. And there you don't have the width of a doorway. It's not the 4 tefachim. So you don't have a proper doorway there. Or it's not high enough at that point. The central point of your arch is high enough. It's 10 tefachim. But since it arches, you don't have 10 tefachim there. So Rabbi Meir says, chokekin lahashlim. We imagine that from the bottom space, you're going to cut out that direct vertical line, and at the top point of your arch, you're going to have a horizontal line, and that's going to define your space of eruv and your space of the doorway, and it's going to give you a proper. It's going to give you a proper halachic space. So that's the chokekin lahashlim. You can cut out in order to define a space. Rabbi Meir, the Amar chokekin lahashlim, and therefore over here also we're going to see the basket and extension of the tree, and it's sort of cut out within the basket to give it a proper 4 tefachim space. Even though that the space of the basket, which is attached to the tree, is less than 4 tefachim. The space itself could be 1 or 2 tefachim. Because it's attached to the tree, I have space to cut out within the tree and make it a proper 4 tefachim space. V'savar like Rabbi Yehuda, and he also follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in regards to the need of an eruv to be sitting on a space that has that's a makam chashuv, that has a valued space. Though Amar be'inan eruv agabe makam arba, that your eruv has to be on a 4 tefachim space. And so even though this basket is 1 tefach maybe or 2 tefachim, but since it's attached to the tree, and I can now go into I can cut out a space within and extend the branch. Extend the basket into the branch itself, or into the trunk of the tree itself. So I don't have to actually do it. Rabbi Meir says you're allowed to chokekin lahashlim. I'm allowed to virtually extend it into another space in order to give it a proper the proper space that it needs. The basket itself doesn't have it, and therefore I have to extend it into the tree, into the basket, and the basket into the tree to combine it into one space. So my Rabbi Yehuda. So where is this halacha of Rabbi Yehuda? The Tani we learned Rabbi Yehuda Eimer. Rabbi Yehuda says not kara b'rshus harabim. Somebody sets up a basketball hoop, right? A basketball hoop in the public domain. What's he do? He takes a post, and he sticks it in the public domain. So within the public domain space, he takes a post, puts it in, and sticks it into the ground. And he puts his eruv on top of that post in the public domain. Now, if that post is 10 tefachim high, 4 tefachim wide, that now is defined as a private domain. On top of that, it's a space as a private domain. So eruv. The eruv is going to be a proper eruv, because even though that it's a reshus hayachid, it's a private domain, and he's intending to be down on the street, which is a public domain, and we said that he's going to be in a different domain. It's not going to be valid. But as we saw before, that anybody that has an eruv, they're wherever they are, they have 4 amos around them as their own personal space, and that airspace is going to be private domain. So as long as he's intending to be for Shabbos, his Kona Shvisa, his Shabbos space is right next to that post. It's going to be within his 4 amos. If it's within his 4 amos, it's going to be defined as within his space. However, if this post does not have 4 tefachim wide, the eruv is not going to be a valid eruv. Now, at this point, we think that if it's not 10 tefachim, or it's not 10 tefachim high, or 4 tefachim wide, it's not going to be a good eruv. And for that, the Gemara is going to ask, wait, if it's not 10 tefachim high, for sure it should be good Eruv because then it's within his space. It's as if it's on the ground. The Eruv is as if it's at his feet. So the Gemara says, "Ein Eruv adarabba hu ve'eruv b'makom echad." If the Eruv is not on a post that's 10 tefachim high, it's only 5 tefachim high. It's only let's say 7 inches from the ground, 10 inches from the ground, 15 inches from the ground. It's all attached. It's basically right at his feet. It's where he is for Shabbos. So why wouldn't it be an invalid Eruv? Ella, so must be really what we're talking about. Hachakama. This is what it means. Kavaya asara, even if it's 10 tefachim high, which defines it as a separate space, but nevertheless it's going to be good because he too is right next to it and it's going to be valid. Nevertheless, you need that the Eruv should be 4 tefachim wide, because if it's not 4 tefachim wide, it's not going to have its own proper space. However, if it's below 10 tefachim, ein kavaya asara. If it's not 10 tefachim high, so now it's automatically in the public domain, and he's for Shabbos in the public domain, and the Eruv also is in the public domain. So then you don't need 4 tefachim at the top because it's already in a significant space. It's in the public domain with him. You only need this if it's above 10 tefachim. So now it's in a private domain. It needs to be in a significant space. It needs to be in a space that has 4 tefachim. And so therefore, when he put the Eruv in the tree as well, it would have to have 4 tefachim wide. It'd have to be a significant space. And he doesn't have the significant space on account of that it's too narrow. So therefore, the basket is going to extend the space and by attaching the basket to the tree. Come on. So whose opinion is this? The look of Rabbi Yossi. This is not like the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. The Tana of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Omer, no, it's kind of Bereshus Rabbah. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says he takes a basket, he takes a post and sticks it into the ground. And he puts a basket on top of it. So the post itself maybe is less than 4 tefachim wide, but he put a basket on there, right? And for a basketball to fit in, it's got to be 4 tefachim wide. So he's got this basket on top of a post in the public domain. The basket is 4 tefachim wide, but the post itself is going to be less than 4 tefachim. Nevertheless, it's going to count as a public, as a private rishus. It's going to count as a good basket. Why? If somebody carries something from a public domain and puts it onto that post, onto that basket, he's going to be chayiv. It's going to count as a private domain, and the reason is because that we say the concept of that we're going to say the concept that the domain, the walls of the private domain, which is the basket above 10 tefachim, come down and create that virtual wall around it, and now it's going to be a private domain. So Gemara says, "Afilu temer Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda." No, I could even say that it's according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda as well, and the reason is Hasam Hadar Mechitzta. There, the wall actually goes straight down. Hachale Hadar Mechitzta. Here, the wall does not go straight down. In other words, the boundaries of it don't go all around this post. And if they go, the basket doesn't go around the post itself, but rather it's on the side of it, like we had with the image of the tree, where it's on the side. So that doesn't count as it doesn't envelop the post, and therefore it's not going to count as its own domain. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, no, the distinction is this: shiny kolkola and a basket attached to a tree, or a basket on top of a traskel, on top of a space by the tree. The reason is because I can actually tilt the basket down and bring the edges of the top of the basket down within the 10 tefachim, which is within the space that I'm in, which is the public domain, and that's why basket is going to be different than on top of a post directly, which I can't tilt. And so the top of the post is going to have to be 4 tefachim wide. The basket itself would not have to be 4 tefachim wide.